This tutorial is going to show you a couple of things that we went through in class. It also matches your instructions. Sometimes it's easier to see it though. We're going to create the first row and we're going to actually create the first stitch. So you're going to take just a little section, you probably have about 12 inches, flip the top so that the one piece goes over the other, reach through from the top and pull the working yarn, which is not the little tail but the long piece, through. You're going to pull it tight and just kind of keep working it through. You don't want to make super tight, but tight enough. And then you can just kind of pull the working yarn to get it to whatever size. To create the next stitch, you're going to reach through from the top and then put the working yarn through the back to create your second stitch. So that's 1 and 2. And you're going to keep going this exact same thing. You don't want this first row, you don't want them to be super small. So these stitches are maybe, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 inches on the inside, something to that effect. And you want to keep going all the way across until you get to whatever stitch count that you'd like. In class we use 30. Alright, so there's my 30 stitches. Just make sure you go back and count. You're going to flip your working yarn or your skein to the other side. And now you have this one loop that's kind of sticking up. I'm going to take the working yarn and I'm going to put it right through from the back of this loop, and I'm going to create a second loop. And you don't want this edge piece, this first loop on either end, to be too loose. Wherever in the next part, it's kind of hard to see it. See these like slanted pieces? Right in the middle of that is like this piece that kind of goes straight across, and you want to grab that little piece and then pull it up and create another loop. It just goes through that little piece. It does not go through the top slant or the bottom slant of the braid. It's just that little cross piece, so you have to kind of search for it. And then you're going to continue on with that process until you get all the way back to the other end. When you get back to the other end, you do want to make sure that you count. Again, you should have 30 stitches, or excuse me, 30 loops. Alright, I have all my stitches here, and we're going to then create the third row. This part's where it gets a little easier. I'm going to move my skein back over to the other direction, and I'm just going to continue to loop from the back. I'm going to put my fingers through the front and then pull the working yarn through the back. And these stitches, again, you don't want to make sure you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of slack. You're only pulling the long tail or the working yarn. You don't want to pull it from the other side because it can actually warp how your blanket will lay. But you don't want a lot of slack in behind there either. You want to make sure that the loops are really close together and that your loop size is consistent. So you continue to work all the way across, and you're going to zigzag, zigzag, zigzag until you've used all of your skeins. This tutorial will show you how to join two different price pieces of yarn. So when you're going to switch a skein, you cross them over, and then you have one tail kind of on the top. You're going to flip it one more time so you kind of have this pretzel shape, And then the very end tails, you're going to loop those through, and I pull all 4 strands tight. So I kind of work it so it's not using up too much yarn. You don't want to pull too hard, of course, because you can snap your yarn. And then as you go through, you want to kind of place your knot. So I'm going to kind of line these up a little bit so that it's right at the back side of one of my loops. It's not in the loop. It doesn't create the loop. It's kind of sitting on the back side of the blanket. And I'm just going to continue on with my row. This tutorial is going to show you how to join 2 different colors if you're switching it for stripes. So I'm at the end of one of my rows here. I have quite a bit of leftover here, which is unfortunate when you're switching. I'm going to cut off just so I have maybe, I don't know, 4, whatever inches you feel comfortable with. Mine is about 4. Pick all the little fuzzies off and just set that piece aside. It's not usable. So I'm going to do the same thing that we did in the last tutorial for joining 2 pieces. You just sort of flip it so that they cross, and then you flip them one more time like the pretzel shape. And then you just flip the top tails in and out, and then you pull it tight. There are other ways to join 2 skeins together. You could stitch the very ends of them, all different kinds of ways that you can tie these knots. So it's really a personal preference. And then when you pull the next one through, the next color will start this row here. And in this section, we're going to show you how to finish off the blanket. So I have my last row, and we want to make sure that when you have all your pieces here, that you have about 3 lengths. So this leftover that I have will go all the way to the end and back, and then there's a whole bunch more. So you want to be able to walk back and forth the length of your blanket about 3 times. There are other ways to finish a blanket, so if you have a different way that you use a little bit less yarn, you are free to do that. So in this last one, I have my working yarn. I'm going to put my fingers through the front of this one, and I'm going to dive into the top of the next one. So now I have 2 loops. I'm going to take my working yarn and go through both loops. And then I'm going to create a little bit longer loop here. It's nice and loose so it doesn't pull the top yarn. Dive through the top of the next one, and it's going to, don't worry, you don't want it to pull like that. You want to just make it a little bit bigger so it doesn't yank your yarn over. And you're just going to continue going right through. You don't want to leave a lot of slack back here. Like you don't want that bubble there. You want to pull the working yarn right up to it and then pull from the side that has the long tail so that it doesn't yank. And again, you can see that these new loops that I'm making are quite a bit longer than what I was making in the rest of the blanket. But you can see that it makes a really nice braid to finish off the top. So again, you're just going to continue to dive through the second one, make this one bigger, then dive through, pull it through, all that kind of stuff. Whatever you want to say to yourself to make the pattern work out great. And you do actually use quite a bit of the yarn that's left, so it looks like there's too much, too much waste, but it actually, by the time you get to the end, there's not much left. All right, so I'm coming up to my last one here. I have just a couple more. And then through my last one, I'm going to again dive through the top, pull it through, and I'm going to create one last loop. I'm going to pull all the pieces, like you see this loop here? You're going to put the tail now, or the last of the working yarn, through this loop, and you're going to pull the whole thing through, the entire thing. You're not going to make any more loops. You're just going to keep pull, 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 pull. And you might have 3 feet, 4 feet, depending on what you got. So sometimes you just have to waste a little. And you're going to kind of slide this knot up to the end to get it tight. You don't want to make it super, super tight that it's distorting the braid. So you just want to have it so it's right to the end. All right, something just like that. And you should have a really chunky braid on the outside. It's a really beautiful look. So I'm going to cut off so I have about, 10 to 12 inches. It's not an exact science, just kind of cut off a bit. You don't want to make it too short though, otherwise it can come unraveled. All right, so now we're going to basically thread this through directly under this chunky part of the braid. So I'm just going to look right, it's going to go right along this line here. You don't want to go through, you want to go right underneath, okay, right under here. It kind of tucks itself in there. And I'm just going to go over, under, over, under, over, under until I get across. And again, you don't want to make sure you don't pull this too hard because you want to keep a nice square corner. So don't yank this tail through. You just want to get it so that it goes through. And again, you're just going to keep working it over, under, over, under. All right, sometimes you can get carried away when you're doing the weaving part. So maybe I'll go through, I think maybe I can go through one more time. And then after I go through, I'm like, oh, that's too short to tie 2 knots because you have to double knot it. So I'm going to pull it back out 1. So I have maybe about 6 inches left. And I'm going to kind of work it however you want to do it. Work it around this little warp and weft strand here. And then pull it out through, directly through the loop. And then kind of knot that. And then I'm going to do one more time to secure it in place. Something just like that, and pull it tight so that it's nice and secure. You don't want to go nuts and rip it, but you do want to pull it nice and tight. And I'm just going to trim off the little piece. See how it tucks underneath there? It's quite nice. You can barely tell it. The only person who knows it's there is the person who made it. So now what you're going to do to finish it is just kind of stitch using regular thread this little piece so it stays down. There's a lot of different ways to get the tails to stay down, so you can come up with your own plan, but we're going to talk about these little pieces where the skeins were joined. You can use regular sewing thread, just all-purpose thread, a needle of any kind, and of course you need the scissors. And what you're going to do is you can see this line kind of running horizontally. I'm going to find the very next one, and I'm just going to kind of wrap it around, okay, just something like that, just to kind of, so it's not sitting right on top. And I'm going to stitch right through the center. You can, as you kind of squeeze the yarn, you can feel the really hard cord in the middle that's holding all the fuzz. So you can just go through, make sure that the very first time that you go through, just make sure that that the needle goes right through the center of that cord. And it doesn't have to be towards the end. You can just kind of do it wherever you want. And if there's a better way that you have to stitch it, feel free to do that. I'm just going to demonstrate one way. All right, well, thank you so much for watching the tutorial. Thank you for coming to the class, and I hope that you had a great time. I hope to see you in the library again very soon. Have a great day.